This conference will now be recorded.
Good morning, everybody. This is Audrey Kidwell with Volunteer Florida. Thank you for logging in today for the Volunteer Generation Fund technical assistance call for the 2019-2020 funding opportunity. In the room with me is Kat Keene, National Service Director, and on the phone is Tracy Lambright, our Senior Financial Analyst. And so we're here today to go over the RFP that we released for the Volunteer Generation Fund. Just as some housekeeping tips, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat box. And if you could self-mute yourself during this call, that would be wonderful. It just helps cut down on background noise. But at any time you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat box, and there'll be time throughout the presentation to ask questions as well. And then this call is being recorded and will be posted to our website by the end of this week.
Thank you, Audrey. Good morning, everyone. This is Kat. I'm so excited that you've joined the call today. For the 2019-20 year of the Volunteer Generation Fund, Volunteer Florida is so excited to support many of you in Florida, small and large organizations that want to increase your capacity to manage volunteers. We're really excited about the expansion. In case you're new to Volunteer Florida, we're the governor's lead agency for volunteerism and national service in Florida. We administer more than $43 million in federal, state, and local funding to deliver high-impact national service and volunteer programs here in Florida. Volunteer Florida promotes and encourages volunteerism to meet critical need across our state. We also serve as the lead agency for volunteers and donations before, during, and after disaster. So you may have connected with us via AmeriCorps or our emergency management support or overall volunteerism. And we're glad that you've joined us today to connect on the Volunteer Generation Fund.
Okay, thank you, Kat. So just some high-level notes about the Volunteer Generation Fund. Volunteer Florida administers this fund, and it's an initiative of the Corporation for National and Community Service, which focuses investment on volunteer management practices that increase volunteer recruitment and retention. So we are at Volunteer Florida looking to support local organizations that want to increase their capacity to recruit, manage, support, and retain skills-based volunteers to serve in high-value volunteer assignments. The grant period is a 12-month period, and it will begin October 1st, 2019, and it will end on September 30th, 2020. And Volunteer Florida is making available up to $350,000 for subgrantees that will be serving in the state of Florida. So some eligibility. Your organization must be a public or private nonprofit organization, which includes faith-based and other community organizations, institutions of higher ed, government entities within states or territories, labor organizations, partnerships, or Indian tribes. We will encourage geographic diversity by actively seeking proposals from all 7 regions of the state as defined by the Florida Division of Emergency Management. The link to that region is on page 5 of the RFP. If you click it, you'll search by county and it'll tell you what region you're in. And then Volunteer Generation Fund cannot be used as an expansion of existing federal funded national service programs such as AmeriCorps, AmeriCorps Vista, Senior Corps, RSVP, or foster grandparent. So please keep that in mind if you have that already at your organization. It just can't be used as an expansion. Here are the focus areas for the grant. There are 6 of them as defined by CNCS. And so what you will need to do is choose only one which best fits your volunteer program or the area that your volunteers will be serving in. We do realize that many of you might encompass all of them or a portion of each, but again, you'll just be able to choose one, and it needs to be what best represents the work that your volunteers will be doing. If you need some more definitions on what those the definitions are for each focus area, there is a link in the RFP on page 10, which will send you to the CNCS website with more information on each of them. We are also looking to fund some organizations that have special considerations, which is disaster services and the opioid crisis. So for disaster services, we're looking for organizations that use skills-based volunteers to improve community resiliency through disaster preparation, response, and recovery. Organizations that are using skills-based volunteers with the opioid crisis are having volunteers to help reduce or prevent prescription drug and opioid abuse. So if you have any of those categories or special considerations at your organization, you will please note that on the application as well. We have some fatal criteria that we'd like to post just so you're aware. So your application won't be reviewed for funding unless all of the following applications, all of the following criteria are met. Proposals must be submitted to Volunteer Florida via the online portal, which is called Blackbaud, no later than Friday, August 16th, 2019 by 5 p.m. We will not be accepting proposals via email or hard copy or fax. The proposal must include the following performance measures. You'll note that you'll have 400 skills-based volunteers recruited, and those 400 volunteers will serve 3,000 hours, and that you'll note that you'll participate in a pre- and post-test assessment, which talks about the implementation of effective volunteer management practices. The proposal request must include $15,000 for new or second-year applications, or $20,000 if you're in your third year of the VGF funding. And it must provide a 100% match, so which is $15,000 if you're a new or second-year application, or $20,000 if you're in your third year. And note, match can be cash or in kind. We are going to get to more of the budget in just a few minutes. And the proposal must also be on a Volunteer Florida budget template, which can be found on our website, and there's also a sample budget as well. And then here are the performance measures, again, just laid out a little differently. And so, again, your organization will recruit 400 volunteers. Those volunteers will serve 3,000 hours, and you'll participate in a pre- and post-test that talks about the implementation of effective volunteer management practices. Again, we go over once contracts have been sent out on what the pre- and post-test looks like, and on some more information on reporting of those hours and the number of volunteers. So I am going to unmute everybody, but again, if you could stay self-muted if you aren't needing to ask any questions. So if there are any questions up to now that you have, we would love to answer those. If you have a very specific question that is very unique to your program, please feel free to email us at vgf@volunteerflorida.org. All right, so I'm going to unmute if there are any questions. I do see though there was one question. So the 3,000 hours is collective, all of the 400 volunteers. So that would be a mix of however many hours that they serve. Not each volunteer needs to do 3,000. As a whole, the whole organization would be 3,000.
And then they have the doctor's strength and how the versus.
I appreciate that, and thanks for that.
Okay, well, hearing no other questions, we are going to move on to the budget.
Thank you. Have a good day.
What is it doing?
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Tracy Lambright, our Senior Financial Analyst.
What they're doing is cleaning up the harbor.
Good morning.
Because there's a 5-volt system that runs through that house. When it touches those little discs, what it's doing is setting the head to the bed, meaning that you're bringing it together. Right?
On just a second.
Oh, yeah, I'm making it for him this time.
So what it does, it sets it.
Here we go. All right, Tracy, are you there?
Can you hear me, Audrey?
Yes, I can.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about the budget and the requirements for the new VGF grant this year. Funds will be awarded to subgrantees for capacity building activities to develop or strengthen skills-based volunteer programs. Funds can only be allocated to personnel salaries, fringe benefits, and database software. You may allocate only personnel funds to a maximum of 2 staff. Fringe benefits can include FICA, health insurance, dental, life, retirement, vision, etc. Any of those company-paid benefits for the employee, and does not include federal withholding. The database software would include any software that you'll be using to maintain your volunteers. For example, Logistics, Volunteer Hub. Some of you may have your own homegrown systems. And just to note that this would not include computers or equipment. And please note that also for database software that if you pay it on a yearly basis, you can only expense the portion to the VGF grant that falls within the grant year. That grant year this year will be October 1st through September 30th. So keep that in mind when creating your budget for this line item. This will be a cost reimbursement contract, which means monthly invoices will be required to request reimbursement for expenses that have been paid for within the month in which reimbursement is requested. Also, supporting documentation, including but not limited to timesheets, payroll and pay stubs, invoices, proof of payments, will be required with the monthly invoices. All grantees, as Audrey mentioned, are also required to meet a 100% in-kind or cash match. This year, for first year and second year grantees, that cash match or in-kind match will be $15,000. And for third year grantees, it will be $20,000. The total match requirement must be met regardless of the federal expenditures, which means we will hold you to that $15,000 or $20,000 match. Depending on your, the year that you are. And last but not least, all grantees are required to submit their most recent audit, including their management letter and their schedule of findings and questions called. If anybody has any questions or needs assistance in creating their budget, please reach out to the VGF mailbox, as Audrey mentioned earlier.
All right. Thank you so much, Tracy. Let's see if
You're
there's any
welcome.
questions really quick in the chat box. So yes, there was a question about the funding. So it can be used to cover up to 2 staff positions, and that can also include any of the fringe benefits as well. Okay. The funds cannot be used for housing volunteers, and it also can't be used for running background checks on volunteers. So again, the funds are strictly limited to the personnel, and ideally the 2 people on the grant are the people who are in charge of recruiting or managing volunteers, and then the database software. If you have any questions of what year you are in, you can email the VGF@volunteerflorida.org, and we can work that out with you. And then, okay, we'll move on to the next part. So these are just some other requirements that we want you all to be aware of. If you are a successful subgrantee, you will report to Volunteer Florida on your performance measures. Again, it's going to be the number of volunteers engaged, the hours served, some basic volunteer demographics, and some narratives based around how you're increasing your organization's effective volunteer management practices. We provide more guidance on that once contracts have been issued. And again, it's twice a year at the mid and the end of year reporting. Background checks, all successful subgrantees will be required to complete an online training about the 3-part background check process. And then something new that we're doing this year is Volunteer Florida will be responsible for completing all checks through TrueScreen and FieldPrint, which again, once contracts have gone out, if that is you, then we give more guidance on that of what we exactly need. And if you're a returning grantee, we'll review those background checks. And if they're correct, then you would not need to rerun them. So again, this is just kind of to let you know that background checks are required for anybody that will be charged to the grant. So ideally, it could be up to 2 people, but Volunteer Florida will be covering those costs. Sorry about that. Here is the timeline. Again, this is in the RFP as well, but I just wanted to highlight 2 things. Applications, again, are due Friday, August 16th by 5 p.m. And then it kind of goes through our internal timeline for you to know of the reviewing and how we provide clarification to individuals. The contract starts October 1st, 2019, and we do anticipate having our Volunteer Generation Fund training in November. The 19th to 21st, but we will have that date confirmed when contracts go out in October. So again, just to let you know kind of from here until at least October what the timeline looks like for you all. And then again, if there are any questions, you're more than welcome to reach out. Are there any questions again? Someone asked about the training. So the actual Volunteer Generation Fund training is in person, and we do require 2 people to come to that, someone that's program that will be working with the volunteers and someone that's finance, because we cover a lot of the Volunteer Florida policies of what invoicing looks like. Again, we'll go over that once once contracts have gone out. And yes, Volunteer Florida typically covers a portion of the cost. And again, we will provide that information once contracts go out. Again, there was a question about the 3,000 hours. No, that is for the entire total. Not each volunteer needs to do 3,000. The organization as a whole needs to have 3,000 hours. Yes, every single person does need to turn in an audit, in the management letter and list of findings, regardless of year. And so we're going to end with some application instructions. These instructions can be found starting on page 14 of the RFP. This link right here is the application link. And it works best in Internet Explorer or Mozilla Foxfire. However, we have found that it can work in Safari. And, but again, it works best in those. So I'm going to open it briefly just for you guys to see it. So if you have never been into our online portal before, you will be a new applicant and you'll have to create an account. Again, the instructions are found starting on page 14 in the RFP. If you are a returning grantee, you will need to just log in using your email and password that you had created. If you can't remember your password, you will have to do forgot password, and the system will send you a new one. And from there, once you log in, the application will be available for you. And then, here is the list for the actual, so if you want to kind of know what the application looks like before you create an account and log in, you can go to our webpage and all of the information will be found here. So again, you can see the link to an RFP, to our budget template, a sample budget, the link to the application, and then right here are the Blackbaud screenshots. Some people really like to see the questions in order of their being asked before logging in, and so that's there. And then also on our page, we will have the link to this recorded call too.
I'm not sure how they decide what belongs in the series or not.
Hold on, there is some background.
That's
okay. So again, this is the home page with all of the information you can find about the Volunteer Generation Fund request for proposals and information. So again, if you have any questions, please email vgs@volunteerflorida.org and we will answer those in a timely manner. And again, applications are due August 16th. Thank you.